Something is changing in Texas. And it is not the heat. It is not the politics. It is something quieter, and in a lot of ways, more unsettling. There are towns and cities across the state right now where the future that was promised, the jobs, the growth, the stability, is starting to look less certain than anyone expected. Some of these places are already feeling it. Others are a few bad decisions or a few bad years away from a serious turning point. This is not a doom video. Texas is still one of the most powerful economic engines in the entire country. But even powerful machines have weak spots. And today, we are going to find them. Number 10. Midland and Odessa. These two cities sit in the heart of the Permian Basin, and for most of the last decade, they were the economic miracle of West Texas. When oil prices were high, Midland had one of the lowest unemployment rates in the entire United States. Money was pouring in. Hotels were packed. Housing was getting expensive. Workers were driving in from hundreds of miles away just to get a piece of it. But here is the problem with building an economy entirely on oil. When the price drops, everything drops with it. And it has happened before. In the mid-1980s, the Permian Basin experienced one of the worst economic collapses in Texas history. Banks failed. Businesses closed. People left. The cities essentially had to be rebuilt from scratch. Right now, the energy industry is facing long-term pressure from the global push toward renewable energy. Electric vehicles are growing. Battery technology is improving. And while oil is not going anywhere in the immediate future, the 30-year outlook for a city that has almost no economic diversity is genuinely uncertain. If you pull oil out of Midland's economy, what is left? That is the question local leaders are not fully answering yet. Number 9. Lubbock. Lubbock has been called the hub city of the South Plains, and for generations it has served as the regional center for West Texas. Texas Tech University anchors the city, the healthcare sector is strong, and the population has been growing steadily. On the surface, Lubbock looks stable. But look closer and you start to see some cracks. The city sits on top of the Ogallala Aquifer, one of the largest underground water reserves in the world. And that aquifer is being depleted at a rate that scientists say is not sustainable. Agriculture in the surrounding region depends almost entirely on that water. Cotton farming, cattle operations, the entire rural economy that feeds into Lubbock as a hub city. All of it depends on water that may not be there in 50 years. Water is going to become the defining issue for West Texas in the second half of the century. Lubbock has time to prepare, but the window is not unlimited. And the city's future depends heavily on decisions that are being made or avoided right now. Number 8. Beaumont. Beaumont sits in the Golden Triangle region of southeast Texas, and it has an identity deeply tied to the petrochemical industry. Refineries, chemical plants, storage facilities. The industrial corridor along the Gulf Coast between Beaumont and Port Arthur is one of the most concentrated petrochemical zones in the entire world. That sounds like economic strength. And in many ways it is. But the same forces pressuring Midland are pressuring Beaumont, just from a slightly different angle. As the global energy transition slowly accelerates, the long-term demand picture for petrochemical production becomes harder to predict. And Beaumont, like Midland, has not done enough to diversify. There is another problem. This part of Texas sits in one of the most hurricane-vulnerable corridors in the country. Harvey in 2017 caused catastrophic flooding that took years to recover from. Climate models suggest that storms of that intensity will become more frequent. Infrastructure that was not designed for repeated major flood events is going to face enormous pressure. Insurance costs in southeast Texas are already climbing. And some residents who left after Harvey never came back. Number 7. Galveston. Speaking of flooding, Galveston deserves its own place on this list. This barrier island city has a fascinating history and a real economy built on tourism, the medical center, and the port. But it is also sitting on a strip of land barely above sea level, in the path of Gulf of Mexico hurricanes, with sea levels that are measurably rising. The Ike Dike, a proposed flood barrier system designed to protect the Houston-Galveston area from storm surges, has been in planning stages for years. Progress has been frustratingly slow. Meanwhile, the city's insurance market is tightening, with some carriers reducing coverage or raising premiums significantly. Long-term homeownership on a barrier island in a warming climate is a financial equation that a growing number of people are starting to question seriously. Galveston is not going to disappear overnight. But it is a city where the gap between the current reality and the future risk is wider than most residents are comfortable acknowledging. Number 6. Del Rio. Del Rio is a small border city of about 35,000 people on the banks of the Rio Grande. It has always been a gateway community, connected economically and culturally to Ciudad Acuña, Mexico, just across the river. Cross-border commerce, tourism, and a significant military presence at Laughlin Air Force Base have kept the local economy functional for decades. But Del Rio sits at the intersection of several pressures that make its future uncertain. Border policy swings dramatically with every administration change in Washington, and those swings have real economic consequences for a city this dependent on cross-border activity. In 2021, Del Rio became a global news story when tens of thousands of migrants camped under the international bridge. The city was overwhelmed in ways that exposed just how limited its infrastructure and resources really are. The Rio Grande itself is also under long-term pressure. Water flow from the river is constrained by drought conditions and upstream water agreements. Agricultural and ranching operations in the surrounding region are watching those water levels very carefully. Del Rio has genuine charm and a tight-knit community. But the combination of political uncertainty, infrastructure strain, and water pressure creates a picture that is difficult to ignore. Number 5. Killeen and Temple. The Killeen-Temple-Fort Hood corridor is one of Texas's more complicated economies. Fort Cavazos, formerly known as Fort Hood, is the largest active-duty military base in the United States by land area. It anchors the entire regional economy. When the base is thriving, the surrounding cities are thriving. When military budgets get cut or base structures change, those cities feel it immediately. That kind of single-source dependence is exactly what economic development experts warn communities against. And Killeen has struggled for years to diversify beyond the base economy. Retail, healthcare, and some logistics have grown, but the private sector has not developed strongly enough to stand on its own without the base as a foundation. There is also a persistent quality-of-life challenge. Killeen has high crime rates relative to comparable Texas cities. Infrastructure investment has lagged behind population growth. And the transient nature of a military community, where a large percentage of residents rotate in and out on 2 to 3 year assignments, makes it genuinely difficult to build the kind of deep civic investment that transforms a place long-term. Number 4. Laredo. Laredo is the largest inland port on the United States-Mexico border, and it handles more trade volume than almost any other land port in the country. When the relationship between the U.S. and Mexico is functioning smoothly, Laredo is an economic powerhouse. Trade flows, trucking companies thrive, customs brokerages are busy, and the local economy hums. But that dependence on cross-border trade is also a massive vulnerability. Policy changes, tariff disputes, or diplomatic friction between the two countries can slow trade volume almost immediately. During periods of heightened border enforcement, wait times at the port of entry stretch to hours, costing trucking companies enormous amounts of money and forcing some to reroute shipments elsewhere. Laredo also has some of the deepest poverty rates of any comparable Texas city. The median household income lags significantly behind the state average. Educational attainment rates are lower than most urban Texas benchmarks. The wealth generated by all of that trade has not translated into broadly shared prosperity for the city's residents. That gap between economic activity and community well-being is one of the most persistent challenges Laredo faces, and it does not have an easy answer. Number 3. The rural towns of East Texas. This one is a little different from the others on the list because we are talking about a region rather than a single city. The small towns scattered across the piney woods of East Texas, places like Nacogdoches, Center, Carthage, and dozens of smaller communities, are facing a slow demographic and economic erosion that has been building for decades. Young people are leaving for Austin, Dallas, and Houston. The timber industry, which once employed thousands across the region, has been shrinking for years as technology reduced the need for human labor. Healthcare access is deteriorating as rural hospitals close or cut services. Small-town main streets are emptying out as residents drive to larger cities for shopping, entertainment, and medical care. This is not a crisis that shows up in dramatic headlines. It is a slow grind. A population that ages without being replaced. A tax base that shrinks quietly. Schools that consolidate. A grocery store that closes and does not get replaced for years. The communities of East Texas have genuine cultural wealth, strong identities, deep roots, natural beauty. But without economic reinvestment, that wealth slowly evaporates. And the timeline is not generous. Number 2. Houston's flood-vulnerable neighborhoods. Houston is one of the most economically dynamic cities in the world. The energy capital of the globe, a massive port, extraordinary cultural diversity, a booming healthcare sector, and real affordability by major city standards. Houston is not in danger of collapsing. But there is a specific and serious problem embedded inside Houston's success story that keeps moving further up every risk analysis. Flooding. Houston is built on flat coastal prairie with clay soil that does not absorb water well. The city's drainage infrastructure was built for a different era of precipitation. And the Houston area has now experienced multiple 500-year flood events in the span of about a decade. Harvey alone caused more than $125 billion in damage. The National Flood Insurance Program paid out claims for years afterward. The city has been investing in flood control infrastructure. Reservoirs have been improved. Buyout programs have moved some of the most vulnerable homeowners out of floodplains. But the problem is massive, and the investment, while real, has not kept pace with the risk. There are neighborhoods in Houston today where homeowners cannot get affordable flood insurance, cannot sell their homes at anything close to market value, and cannot afford to elevate or flood-proof their structures. They are trapped in a loop that local government has not fully solved yet. And the climate models are not reassuring. More intense storms, more rainfall in shorter periods, and continued development in flood-prone areas all point in the same direction. Houston is going to be dealing with this problem for a very long time. Number 1. The small towns of the Texas Panhandle. If there is a single place in Texas that most clearly represents the tension between a proud past and an uncertain future, it is the small towns of the Texas Panhandle. Amarillo is the anchor city, and it is doing reasonably well. But outside of Amarillo, in towns like Pampa, Borger, Childress, and Shamrock, the picture is genuinely difficult. These communities were built on agriculture, specifically wheat farming and cattle ranching, and on industries that supported that agricultural base. For most of the 20th century, that was enough. Towns had their hospitals, their schools, their movie theaters, and Main Street retailers. They had identity and they had stability. But decades of agricultural consolidation have eliminated the small farming operations that once supported these towns. The number of farms in the Panhandle has dropped dramatically, while the size of remaining farms has grown enormously. Fewer farmers means fewer people, which means smaller tax bases, which means declining services, which means fewer reasons for young people to stay. The Ogallala aquifer problem that we mentioned with Lubbock is even more acute here. Some parts of the Panhandle are already seeing significant drops in well water levels. There are farmers in this region who are actively managing the final years of irrigation agriculture on their land, because the water will not support it much longer. When irrigation goes away, dryland farming returns, and dryland farming supports far fewer people per acre than irrigated farming does. Add the fact that the Panhandle sits in Tornado Alley, that extreme temperature swings are becoming more pronounced, and that healthcare infrastructure in many of these towns is down to a clinic and a long drive to the nearest hospital. And you have a combination of pressures that is genuinely challenging to solve. What makes this number 1 on this list is not that these towns are failing right now. It is that the pressures are structural. They are not caused by a single bad policy or a single bad year. They are the result of long-term economic, demographic, and environmental shifts that do not reverse easily. The people who live in these towns are tough, resourceful, and deeply rooted. They are not giving up. But the question of what these places look like in 20 or 30 years is one that does not have a comfortable answer yet. Texas is enormous. And like everything enormous, it contains multitudes. The same state that is attracting billions of dollars in investment and hundreds of thousands of new residents every year is also home to places where the future is genuinely unclear. That tension is not a contradiction. It is the truth. And the towns and cities on this list deserve honest attention. Not because they are lost causes, but because the people who live in them deserve the resources and the focus to navigate what is coming. Which of these places surprised you the most? Drop it in the comments. And if you want more honest looks at what is actually happening across Texas, you know what to do.